what do we mean when we say spiritual and not religious? What are we even talking about?
The idea of spirituality is connected to the transcendent. There's a mystical.
You do believe in a higher power, but your beliefs are more ambiguous versus more clarifying of like one God.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast. I'm Leslie, and I'm super excited for today's conversation. It's a big one. We could talk for a long time. We are talking today about how to engage a spiritual but not religious generation. That's where we're going today. I am in the studio with some incredible friends. I've got Shane, I've got Lauren, I've got Matt with me today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves before we jump into this conversation.
Sweet. My name is Shane. I am a part of the Orange Students team. I'm the director of Orange Students Project Strategy, which is a mouthful.
It is.
Thanks, Leslie.
You're welcome.
I'm just kidding. So I'm a part of the team here. What else am I? I am spiritual and religious. I'm not really sure. Yeah, where to go with that.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Hey, Lauren.
Oh, wait. Hold on. I was a youth pastor for a long time.
You
so
were.
You're like, why is he talking about this? Yeah, I've been in youth ministry for like 15 plus years. So,
Yep. You got some credibility.
Excited for this conversation.
Love it. Lauren, what's up?
Hi, I am the lead editor of training materials at Orange Leaders, and I've also spent time serving in both rural and urban youth ministry contexts.
We love it.
That's great.
And what's up, Matt? We've got Matt joining us digitally.
What's up, everybody? I'm Matt. I'm a next-gen pastor at New Life Fellowship Church in Queens, New York. I've been in youth ministry for over 20 years. I love it. And I love having conversations like the one we're about to have today.
Yes, thanks for joining us, Matt. We're super excited. I think probably the first place to dive in is what do we mean when we say spiritual and not religious? What are we even talking about? And so I want to know, even in your own opinion, how would you define that concept? How do you see that either playing out or what comes to mind when you say spiritual, not religious?
I think to me, the idea of spirituality is connected to the transcendent. There's a mystical aspect to it often. I think whether you're talking about this within the church or just within culture at large. So I think it is being concerned with the unseen, being concerned with the things that transcend us, being concerned with a higher power of some sort, and trying a bunch of different means to make sense of what many people believe is a reality of what exists out there. But I also this was interesting to me. So I just looked at the definition of spirituality from my good friend Siri. She's the best. She's not actually, but she's getting better, I think, with AI. Anyways, spirituality, the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things, which I thought was really interesting.
Interesting. So, Okay. What about you, Lauren?
So I'm thinking about the difference between religious and spiritual kind of in three different continuums, from ambiguity to clarity.
Ooh.
In the sense of like ambiguity, you do believe in a higher power, but your beliefs are more ambiguous versus more clarifying of like one God or like the name of a person. And then individualized to corporate or community of like, this is what I believe, this is my practice, but I'm not necessarily engaging with other people as much, or at least that is less membership based than like friendship. And then also freedom, individuality and freedom to commitment, and the sense of like, I am engaging with something that does not ask very much of me. I don't think versus being more committed and it's asking something of me.
That's so
but
good.
I made that up. So all of the definitions
She's
might
so
be
smart.
the exact
that's good.
opposite.
Yeah.
She's so smart.
You steal
Oh
that,
my
she's going to
gosh.
sue you.
Yeah, we are going to
And
sue
if she
you.
won't, I will. So
We're
look
going to
out.
copyright that and put it in the show notes because that's brilliant, Lauren. That's brilliant. Matt, I want to know what comes to mind in your context when you think about the phrase spiritual, not religious generation, or just that concept. Yeah, how would you define that in your world?
You know, first I have to say that Lauren's "I just made that up" is my 3 weeks of research to come up with
Exactly.
the answer.
Exactly.
So that was really beautifully said, incredibly well done. But, you know, when I think about it along the same lines, I think it comes down to a matter of if I'm spiritual but not religious, it means I don't have to ascribe to any rules but the ones I decide are applicable to me for myself. So I'm not fitting into a container or category of religion. I get to decide what aspects of what faiths or what things I want to apply to myself, and no one can tell me that it doesn't fit or belong, because I'm defining my own spirituality. And we have a generation that's all about defining for themselves who they are, what they believe, and what they want to do. Religion tends to be more focused on a certain set of rules that they have to stay within, and they just don't want to do that, particularly when you consider just how bad of a name religion has, generally speaking, and the way it's viewed around the world right now. So I just think it's more about exercising freedom and saying, I'm interested in a power that's higher than myself. I'm interested in something influencing the world that's beyond myself, but not particularly with a guiding set of principles or rules that I don't get to define for myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
For sure. I'm curious if we think that one is better than the other. Is spiritual or religious, are they mutually exclusive and one's better than the other? Is there one that people should be aiming for, or is this maybe a lack of integration of both concepts? I don't know. I think it's easy to criminalize one or the other. Maybe it should be. I don't know. This is all rethinking. So I'm live on the spot rethinking some things, even because I pose it that way because even as you guys were kind of explaining some things about spiritual, I'm like, those are some things I do want to be true of my faith and my practice, but I can also see how some things of that could get misused in a way that's maybe possibly harmful. So anyway, I'm curious, what's the relationship between those two things? Is one bad, one good?
You know what, that's a really difficult question, I think, for me to respond to. And the reason I feel that way is because I grew up Pentecostal, so spirituality was highly ingrained in my faith journey, but I also grew up in the movement of mainstream American evangelicalism, which rejected this idea of religion, at least in theory. We're a relationship, not a religion.
Yeah, totally.
And so to pit those two against each other, like, I don't even know. Like, I struggle to go, is one better than the other? Because at times, depending on your flavor of church or your church context, both of them have been bad, or both of them have been good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like it's weird to even think about those two at odds now.
Yeah.
Because over the last few decades, probably, I don't know, 4 decades, those have been contentious topics.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would say they really do feel a lot like, I think our view on them is a result of how poorly they've each been explained. Like, I grew up in the church the same way, similar to what Shane was talking about, where it was all about, oh, we don't tell people we're religious. We are in relationship with Jesus, and that's what it's all about. And to say that you're religious is actually bad and wrong, but to also say you're spiritual feels and sounds too mystical. And so we don't want to be in that space either. So we really hyper focus on this idea of relationship above all else. When in fact, I think what we need to do is just be clear about what we mean about things. So that way, when we use these terms, people understand what we mean, instead of just jumping off the deep end with assumptions about what all this stuff means.
Yeah, that's really good, because I do think that probably, even as you're alluding to, Matt, every generation has had their semantics around these words about how they describe, their faith or their spirituality or their religion. And so I think some of it is semantics, but for the sake of this conversation, we're going to go ahead and say, we're trying to talk from the way we tend to typically hear it being used with Gen Z, which I think Lauren laid out so perfectly. It's kind of this dichotomy between ultimate freedom, lack of accountability, I make my own rules, individualized, to the other side being community, accountability, like just clarity, even with defining like one God, that kind of thing. So that, for the sake of this conversation, that's what we're talking about. So when we talk about a spiritual but not religious generation, what are some ways that shows up? What are some ways that manifests for them? So just what are some of the key words? What are some of the practices that we see in that generation?
So manifest is one of them, but I want to share this. I've shared this in a couple of different contexts before. But in 2019, MTV Insights did a survey they conducted of among 1,000 participants between the ages of 14 and 29. And here's what they found. 87% know their zodiac sign. So there's one.
Zodiac.
Yep. 75% trust that astrology works.
Astrology.
65% regularly check their horoscopes.
Okay.
So I mean, you've got this deeply spiritual generation that is willing to look to all sorts of different things to maybe find some answers.
Yeah, that's good. What else? What else shows up when you're talking to maybe a Gen Z or Gen Alpha, one of our friends from that generation, and they're like, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. Here's how I practice my spirituality. What are some of the things they're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard them use terms just in my context, like meditation. I'm going to go and meditate someplace without being connected to a particular style of prayer. It's literally, I'm going to a place to sit down and think quietly about a particular thing. Even some of them they do things like, I'm going to go practice yoga or some form of yoga as a means of physically exercising my spirituality in a given moment in time. So it's like I said before, I think it comes back to this idea where they get to define so much of it for themselves, which is what makes it so appealing. I can do what I feel like doing at any given time, and that might look a bunch of different ways. Like I've had kids come up to me and say, oh, hey, like, do you do Enneagram? Because I kind of look at my Enneagram number as a form and a means of how I understand and orient my spirituality as well.
That's interesting, Matt. Yeah. Lauren, I'm curious your thoughts.
So can I respond to Matt first?
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. And I think Christians do this a lot too. And I think one of the ways we build trust with the next generation in these conversations is not pretend that we're not super individualized and choosing our own things that we follow and orienting our life towards other things and doing rituals and believing some really absurd things that I believe with my whole heart. But we cannot be condescending towards them and say the things you believe are absurd about the stars or rituals or rocks when we believe what we do about Jesus, and I believe it with my whole heart. And I think we have to be honest about the similarities between us so that we can't, because I think they look at us and are like, oh, you're hypocritical or condescending, and then we lose.
That's a good perspective. That's a good perspective.
Can I rapid fire a couple more I thought of?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like energy. There's a lot of conversation around energy, frequencies and different waves, the universe. I know, Lauren, you just mentioned rocks, like crystals, rocks. A big thing, and I see this pop up on social media, are darkness retreats. Like that's another way to connect. They're not necessarily connected to any one religion, but they are a spiritual experience from what I've heard. There's just all sorts of different means.
I would throw in there probably tarot cards, like palm reading, that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about, partially because I think the reason all of those things are so appealing is because maybe in some way they either have, and I'm being very careful with my words because I don't want y'all being like, Leslie believes in all these things, but because they were created by our creator, it is easy to tie a spiritual nature to some of those things, right? Specifically, I'm thinking crystals or even moving your body. Like we should have a theology of our bodies, right? How to be in your body, God gave us these bodies. And so I think the thing that gets really alluring to a generation when it's easy to name the things that are quote unquote wrong with the church or Christianity, or actually wrong with the church or Christianity, like some of the offenses that are easy to name, it's easy to want to take the spiritual side of it, but not take the label side of it in some way. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I guess I'm with you, Lauren, on like not being condescending and giving them a little bit of credit of like, I would be a hypocrite if I said, when I go on a hike and connect with nature and meditate on God's word, this is a part of my spiritual life. And they're saying, okay, I'm going on a hike and finding rocks that speak to me and I'm meditating. How is this different? Right. So there's these, I don't know, there's this interesting relationship between some of those things.
Yeah. I just think like oftentimes we distance ourselves from that as Christians. Like our first like remember the satanic panic? Like, I mean, maybe
No,
don't
I've never
remember.
heard
I shouldn't
that
say
phrase.
remember. Like none of us are probably
Please tell me
alive
more.
for it. But like there is kind of like a new era of that. Like it was just this idea that everything is the devil, you know, and like all mainstream media, all music, like everything. And in some ways we kind of do the same thing where we just like want to hold up our cross to it and be like, no, let's not even think about it or talk
Which
about it.
I would say that in itself.
Exactly. But and I'm not saying to dabble in these things.
Yeah,
So don't hear that. What I am saying though is like even throughout the scriptures, the followers of God were in proximity to this stuff. So I mean, the Magi, Let's just talk about the Magi for a second.
Literally.
I mean, they were following a star. I don't want to get into the depths of what that means, but I'm just saying these things show up. I'm trying to think of other. Who is it? Y'all can. Was it the Queen of Sheba or something like that? I think. Like there are sorcerers. There are. There are mystics like all throughout the scriptures, and they weren't always used as examples as this is what you should do, but my point in bringing this up is that Christians and followers of God have consistently been in proximity and found ways to navigate it. I can't help but think of Paul at the Areopagus. He's sitting with incredibly intellectual people who were also, I would say in some regards, spiritual leaders of the day, making sense of humanity in some way. He looks at the unknown God before them and leverages that to go, hey, I know who that God is that you're looking for, that you're leaving space for. His name is Jesus. I just think there's brilliance in that example and in examples all throughout Scripture.
Yeah. And I think that gets at what I'm assuming, I'll speak for myself, but like breaks my heart when I'm talking to a kid who is showing me their crystals and we're talking through some of the things and I'm hearing the kinds of things that they are attributing to those crystals. What breaks my heart is that, the emptiness of this is not going to fulfill that thing you're really looking for.
Yep.
I can I'm just going to keep walking with you through life, through this part of your life. But my hope is that you get to the thing that does fulfill, right? That you get to Jesus, that you get to the Holy Spirit, that you get, and you don't feel like it's a compromise or a lesser form of spirituality, that you see that it's actually a much more full experience. So yeah, I think that emptiness, when we think about Gen Z and the things they're turning to, let's share some of y'all's thoughts on that. I'll pitch it to you, Lauren.
I just think about the questions these things are answering for them. And if we could get really curious about what questions and what they're looking to these things for, we'll have better clarity on how to serve them and love them through it. Because also, I know every individual relates to the things we're talking about differently. Yeah. There are girls who talk about manifesting all the time, and they don't mean that they actually believe there's something to it. Yep. Some do, but I just think we need to get really clear about what definitions they're using to define these things and be willing to get curious about what they believe these things are doing for them and what we can offer them, like you said. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my next question. Let's get kind of practical. If a kid or a teenager comes up to you and they are saying, hey, I really want to change some things in my life. I've been watching YouTube videos. A lot of the people I follow, they are really manifesting the boyfriends they want, the cars they want, the body they want, all the different things. And a kid or teenager comes up to you and they're like, I'm really thinking about getting into this manifesting thing. I think it can really work for me. How do you respond? What do you say?
I think that's a great moment to ask questions and to ask open questions, not yes or no close-end questions, but to get them talking, get into a deeper conversation about what they actually hope to accomplish in manifesting. Because ultimately manifesting is very self-centered practice. It says, I can do this with my own mind, within my own strength, within my own ability. Whereas prayer, which is really where I ultimately want to direct them, prayer is about relying on something bigger, stronger, and greater than ourselves and outside of ourselves. And so I think I would start with asking questions, but the eventual place I'd want to lead them is to that place of saying, hey, our dependence and our trust is really more on God than it is in any one of our individual abilities to make something happen in our own lives and our own strength with the limits of our own minds and abilities.
That's good. That's good. All right, Lauren, this next one's coming to you. If a kid showed up and was talking about, I really want a physical manifestation to help me connect to my faith. I want something tangible that I can purchase or carry with me. And I'm thinking about getting maybe into crystals, or I've been looking, in these different places. What would you say?
Like Matt kind of alluded to, first I would ask a lot of questions about what they thought the crystals would do for them, where the power in that lies, what they were seeking the use of these things for. But within the Christian tradition and within the Bible, people set up Ebenezers. people within the Catholic tradition, rosaries are used, and I don't want to misspeak because I don't fully understand that practice. But I would be very careful about asking what they mean and what they are using these things for. And I would be very careful to not just say, oh, then that's like cool because Christians do that too. That's not the answer either. But there is, hey, do you need a physical reminder of the way God has been good to you? Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Do you need help because you need to move your fingers, move your hands when you're praying because that helps you focus? Let's talk about that because I think there are things that you can use. Getting very curious about what they're using these things for and not being scared to explore practices that are a part of the Christian tradition that we may just not be as familiar with.
Yeah. I want to, that's so good. This is so thoughtful. Shane, I'm coming to you with the next one. All right.
Okay.
A kid comes up to you. They talk about wanting to get into, I'm going to make up a ridiculous example. I don't know. They want to get into some transcendent yoga meditation, clear your mind, go to, I don't know, whatever their thing is. They come to you talking about that. I don't know what's your response to them.
Yeah, I think I would just ask why a lot. I had a leader in my life that taught me to ask why 7 times to really get to the core of what's going on. So that's where my question goes, or that's where my mind goes. I would want to explore the why behind it, and then if I could find ways to extract the benefit or extract the practical, or even point them to what we would say are spiritual practices modeled in the life of Jesus, that'd be probably the route that I'd take them on. I think I get so curious around this too. Like what does a student want to manifest, or what are they aiming for? Because sometimes there's also like really practical ways to help them too. It's like, you want to manifest a date, like you need to manifest some Riz, bro.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Or like, I'm just thinking like, I know my God turned water to wine and split the Red Sea.
He can do it for you.
He can do it for you.
You're a
maybe. No, but I'm saying like, let's be real though. For real.
Yeah.
I think that there are ways to point them to Christian spiritual practices, which feels, I don't even know if that is the proper way to say it. But sometimes there's some really practical solutions too, and you almost like don't want to over mysticize it. Like, I don't know.
I do think it's interesting. I was going to say weird, but let me stay curious. I think it's interesting that our Christian faith does have physical, tangible things. We literally carry around a quote unquote ancient book. Like what have we done, maybe even as Christians or as a church or whatever, to make it so weird that it feels like a thing you want to reject versus a thing you want to be curious about when you're trying to engage with the spirituality, where I'm like, I'd be fascinated by an ancient letter written to me by God. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. What are you thinking, Lauren?
And Leslie, y'all might cut this, but when we're thinking about all of these practical practices, we need to think about, is this actually dark and unhelpful and not something we want kids to engage in because it is evil, or not something that is rooted in truth?
Yes.
Or is it something we don't understand because it is not from our culture and we have a prejudice against it? And those are two different things. And there may be some overlap. I'm not saying that everything is cool, but
that's good.
Sometimes what we think is evil is actually more a reflection on our bias than it is the truth of whether it's evil or not.
We can unpack that for hours. We're going to have to keep talking about it. That's fantastic. No, that's a good thing to name. A great thing to name. So I'm kind of maybe going to lead us with this last question. I want to know, what role, let's get kind of practical, what role can a youth leader play in the life of a kid or teen as they are exploring religion or religious practices? Like, what are some things we should either keep in mind as we're walking with them through that part of life? And what can we do as people who are in their lives?
I think everybody kind of started off saying it with the whole idea of starting from a place of curiosity. I think if you get to a place where we're looking to ask good questions to better understand how to respond, I think Lauren just made a great point. and hopefully it stays in the episode, about there's just a way that spirituality is often disordered and misplaced. And I think what we can do is, with our curiosity, help aim a kid and aim these spiritual practices in a direction that points and leads them towards God, as opposed to this nebulous thing that's out there. And so less reliant on ourselves, more in touch, more in tune, and more connected to what God is doing. And I think you all said that in the ways that you said, hey, if a kid came to you with this is how I would direct them. You're in a sense telling them, hey, there's a spiritual practice that you're interested in. We just want to get it pointed in the right direction that actually leads you towards God. And so I would start off with curiosity and asking really great questions, but that requires me to manage my own anxiety about the topic, and not just jump to a place of, oh my gosh, I can't handle you having a different idea, so I need to just fix it and correct it. You can actually just take a beat and be curious, enter that kid's world, so you can understand things from their point of view, so you even know where to start the conversation in the first place.
That is so good. So well said, Matt. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, I just can't help but think, hearing Lauren and Matt talk, that fear is probably one of the biggest blockades to us truly reaching and engaging the next generation right now. And what I mean by that is, it's almost never beneficial to function out of a place of fear of things that you don't understand or don't know. That's going to keep you from being curious. That's going to cause you to pass judgment far too soon. And you're not even going to afford yourself the opportunity to speak into the life of a student if you're just afraid of what they do. Like, hear me out. I'm going to go back to my Pentecostal roots
I
here.
know, because I was about to say it
but
too.
if the Spirit of the living God
Yes.
lives in me,
Yes.
then what am I afraid of
Okay.
in connecting with a student and hopefully helping them navigate from this place of exploration and curiosity into discovery that shows them that Jesus is the only one who can show them the love and guide them into the life that they're longing for.
Yes.
Like, that's it for me. I'm like, let's just not work out of a place of fear.
Yeah.
And that'll allow us to ask good questions. That'll allow us to Google things and not feel like it is going to, destroy our relationship with Jesus. I'm just like, I don't know. Fear is far too often a motivation, in my opinion, in our society and culture and Christian culture today. And I'd love to see that shift.
Yeah. I hear you definitely saying, like, be confident enough in your walk, in your belief, in your relationship with God to be curious about someone else's, right? And
exactly.
like, we have to, I'll speak for myself, from my Pentecostal roots, but just this whole idea, if we are willing to acknowledge the good side of the spiritual realm of the Holy Spirit and, God and all these things, I think there's also a part of us where our fear comes from, is because we don't often name that if there's this good side of the spiritual realm, maybe there also exists a whole other side of that realm, right? And so I think we get afraid of even naming that. We don't even talk about it. So yeah, I agree. I think that fear part is something we really got to figure out in our responses to kids and teenagers. Lauren, I'm coming to you because I know you've got some thoughtful reflections on another thing that we can do that we don't often think about.
This might be complicated, but you need to partner with the parent through this, because chances are the teenager is either talking to the parent about it or not, or the parent has really big questions, or the parent might be really scared. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could partner with that parent and help them clarify some things and help them understand their teenager more, and be honest with them about what is happening? You definitely don't want to say, oh, we're exploring this, and freak them out. But just anytime you can partner with the parent through this, I think it's helpful.
Yeah. I even learned that is helping me rethink some things. I'm even thinking about the parent who is leading the kid in that way. The parent who is, has their crystals and things. How do you continue to keep the relationship strong by, when you're talking to the kid and teenager, you're not doing or saying anything that undermines the parent, even as you partner with the kid to lead them maybe a different direction. I don't know. You are bringing a much more holistic approach when we're like their family context. And I know we've mentioned that a few times, but
I think, and I want to hear everybody else talk on this too, but I think a really practical responsibility that youth ministry leaders have is to build a bridge from for lack of a better term, like secular spirituality, which sounds even weird to say, but I think it'll just make sense to people, to the fact that spirituality has always been a part of the Christian faith. In fact, we see it in spiritual practices that Jesus walked in consistently.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility to build a bridge and show students how to practice spirituality as a part of their Christian faith.
Yeah. My response to that would be, there are probably maybe denominations or communities outside of your typical denomination that can help you do that, who are maybe a little bit less afraid of some of the things because they're living it out in a different way. So I guess I'm just saying, partner with other people who are already walking that way. He's like, what can I learn from your church? Can I come attend for a couple of Sundays, or can I come to one of your prayer nights and see how it's different than our prayer nights? And I think there's things we can learn from crossing traditions with even in our own faith.
That's what I did with Matt. I want to hear Matt speak on this. Like they do this at New Life.
Yeah, I think when you look at church history, even there are ancient practices that the early church fathers were regularly participating in, and encouraging others to participate in, that we've really moved away from, especially mainstream evangelicalism. Like everything became bigger, better, louder, faster, brighter, all that kind of stuff. And yet these guys would go and sit in silence before God, and they would just simply enjoy his presence in silence. And so there's always been this sense of, like, there's this underlying spirituality about being a Christian, and yet our church practices have gotten really so far away from that. Like we've oriented everything around offering words to God all the time. We sing songs, we read scripture out loud, somebody preaches, somebody talks to you about giving and making an offering gift and all that kind of stuff. There's always all this talking and speaking and interjecting what is the words flowing through ourselves. And where do we leave space for something like silence in prayer? Like where do we leave room for things like how is God coming to me through stuff like grief and loss and sadness? How do we deal with the realities that we are a whole person, that we have our life on the surface and we have a life beneath the surface that we often don't give God access to because we're unwilling to even look at those parts of who we are. And so when I hear this whole conversation around spirituality, I think it should actually encourage us when kids want to get into this kind of stuff, because what it demonstrates is they have a hunger for spiritual things. They have a hunger for some level of spiritual exploration. But the loudest voices about this stuff is not the church. It's social media. It's their friends. It's all of what culture is saying spirituality looks like. And what would happen if we turned up the volume on the conversation around, to use Shane's phrase, Christian spirituality? What would it look like for us to start to talk that way and introduce some of these spiritual practices to young people when they come to our churches?
I love it. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you all for offering your thoughts, for rethinking and being curious together. I really do think part of underlying what we're saying is that there's no quick, easy fix to trying to form a deeply rooted, deeply fully formed life around spirituality. It is relationships, which are the long game. It is silence and stillness and solitude. It is staying curious, and none of those things you just buy on Amazon and get delivered to your house. You got to stay in it. So thank y'all so much for being willing to explore this conversation together. Thank you so much for tuning into this conversation. Thanks for the grace even as we navigate things. This is a huge conversation. We've talked about a lot of things. Listen, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you're rethinking, or conversations you're having, or questions you even have. You can always DM us at Orange Students on Instagram. Thanks so much for joining us.